This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian. Imagine that there's something you're really passionate about, an interest and talent you have, something that you feel called to do, not just to earn a paycheck, but rather out of a sense of obligation. You decide at a young age to pursue this and make it your life's mission, but then the circumstances around you change through no fault of your own. Powerful people make rules preventing you from doing what you love, and the situation is totally out of your control. Suddenly, practicing the skill you have has become really dangerous, and yet your work now seems more important than ever. That's basically a summary of the past few years of the life of my friend Ivan. He's a journalist from Russia who's been forced to leave his native country due to the war against Ukraine and the resulting Russian crackdown on press freedom and free expression. As you probably know, the current conflict is now entering its third year, and it's been a humanitarian disaster. According to UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, it's displaced nearly 7 million Ukrainians globally. And on the other side, an estimated 900,000 Russians have also fled their country for various reasons. Among them are economic migrants, conscientious objectors, and political refugees, but also a smaller subset of hundreds of exiled journalists who've had to leave in order to continue to report freely without having to worry about their personal safety. Here's Ivan's story.
My name is Ivan. I'm a Russian exiled journalist. I was born in Vladivostok, which is far east Russia. And then I moved with my parents to Vladimir, which is around 200 kilometers away from Moscow. I remember from the very beginning, I sort of found out what is Wikipedia, and I sort of fell in love with the whole concept. And I remember I was 10 years, 12 years, maybe 15 years old. I remember this moment when you click on one article and then you sort of go to another one and then to another one and then to another one. You started reading about Vladimir Putin and then you somehow end up on war in Lebanon or something like that. So I remember this idea and this sort of excitement of discovery and research and all that. And then I think it was 2014, right after the annexation of Crimea, I got interested in politics and I started learning a lot about it. My parents got me this camera and I started photography. And I was like, I want to go to these places like Kyiv and Odessa and Moscow, protests in Moscow and all that. I want to tell people what are the implications of this event or something. And I remember at some point I decided that I needed to start my own blog. And that was on this platform called LiveJournal, which was pretty big at the time in Russia. Then I gradually started doing, first it was blog posts, then it was more on journalistic side, and then I started listening to this podcast, audio, narrative stuff, and I was like, okay, now I know what I want to do.
As Ivan said, Russia's takeover of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula was the event that first sparked his interest in covering the news. It marked the start of the war between the two countries, and it was condemned by world leaders at the time as a violation of international law. But in places like Ivan's small town, many people celebrated it as Russia regaining territory that rightfully belonged to it.
People just felt really patriotic about the annexation of Crimea and all that, and it was 14 or 15 at that time. So I was I was arguing constantly with my teachers at school and got into trouble, but it was okay.
Is that because you were getting different news and information from Wikipedia?
Not like Wikipedia, but LiveJournal at the time. And yeah, I was getting different information. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were people who were supportive, but again, I had this choice. I could go from one article to another article and it would be totally different perspectives, totally different opinions on this whole situation with annexation of Crimea, and that this is a bad thing. People my age, they didn't give a shit about it, but teachers were really supportive of everything and they were like, oh, okay, this is good, Crimea got back to Russia, this is such a good thing. That's why I argued with them. if this person is older than me, it doesn't mean that you're right. My parents were not so great with teachers either, because when, my parents got called to school, they were not going like, oh yeah, he's such a bad kid because he's arguing with you. No, they were like, okay, but can you argue back? Maybe can you like do a little political debate or something? I don't know. So my parents were great, and they are great.
So you were, in your teens, maybe early 20s, you had like your whole life ahead of you. What were your dreams at that point, and what were you hoping to do?
I wanted to become like a journalist. I wanted to do something big. And I remember like listening to podcasts and reading the New York Times and the Washington Post, like big features on Russia, on the Middle East. And I was like, I want to do something like that, like something meaningful and something compelling and thoughtful and not too liberal, not too conservative. I wanted to do just a good journalism. And I want to travel, and I wanted to do something like, I don't know, maybe international reporting, something like that. And then when I got into narrative audio, like listening to Radiolab, listening to WNYC Serial, all this, I was like, okay, maybe I can do something like what these guys are doing, but in Russian.
So he started making a podcast where he did interviews with interesting people. And around this time, he also began applying for jobs, including at the Novaya Gazeta newspaper.
Novaya Gazeta is one of the most prominent independent outlets in Russia. And like, I didn't have any journalism education or something, but these people from Novaya Gazeta, they were like, what you're doing for your podcast, we wanted you to do this for us. And I was like, holy shit, that's the dream. That's the dream.
He did some stories for them, which led to another podcast producer job. But then things started to get complicated.
2021 was the year when Alexei Navalny was convicted to 3 years in prison. 2021 is also the year of the Kremlin's crackdown on press in Russia, like the new wave. I was just getting started, and it was the year when so many bad things happened to independent journalism in Russia.
Alexei Navalny was an anti-corruption activist, a leader of the political opposition, and a prominent critic of Vladimir Putin. Following his imprisonment, mass protests took place across Russia, and the Russian government, sensing a threat, began enforcing laws that had a chilling effect on freedom of speech. Still, like many Russians at the time, Ivan kept his head down and forged ahead, holding out hope that things might not be quite as bad as they appeared.
At that point, I was totally like aware of what is happening in Russia, but I was like, maybe it's gonna be okay. It was like this battle inside of me, because Russia in 2021 was a really great place. I mean, Moscow is a great city. You have great restaurants. You have people coming from all over the world. You want to order some clothes from Europe? Okay, it's like 2 days, 5 days, and it's here in your apartment. You want to buy an iPhone? Here, you can do it like right away. You want to see a concert? It's also great. Now we can understand that this was the thing that Putin did so brilliantly, that he sort of convinced the entire world that after 2014, after the annexation of Crimea, everything is fine, Russia is fine, you still can do business as usual with Russia. And that was sort of the devil in that. So there was this sort of like agreement between Russian people and the Kremlin. If you don't go into politics, you're going to be fine.
But then, in February of 2022, things reached a breaking point when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
And then in 2 or 3 days, there were a lot of new laws coming out about journalism, that journalists cannot, say that this is a war. They should say that this is a special military operation, and other stuff like you can only do journalism using the official sources, the official Russian government sources, which is not journalism. This law came out, and I was like, so I'm writing this word, war, and I'm basically an outlaw now. What the hell is happening? I was like, this is not right. I felt like I want to be able to publicly question the actions of the government, and I also wanted to do public journalism. I didn't want to do like anonymous, like changing my name and something. And I also was a little worried about the whole like Russian army conscripts and this kind of thing. We didn't know they're gonna close the border, they're gonna send everyone to do this war and all that. I knew that I wouldn't go to the war. I knew that for sure. And I was like, okay, this is gonna get worse, this is gonna get worse. And then I remember I was talking with my mom, and I was talking with my girlfriend, and I was like, okay, maybe I need to leave.
So just a few weeks later, Ivan began packing his bags.
It was hard for my girlfriend, and it was hard for me because, I remember my dog, childhood dog, he was old, and I remember I went for a walk with him, and I was like, okay, this is probably the last time that I'm gonna see him. Sometimes I rewatch this video that I took before I left because I was filming my dog just to remember him. And yeah, that was hard. But my parents and my loved ones, they were all really supportive. And my friends also. By that time, they understand why am I doing what I'm doing. And they were like, okay, yeah, you better leave because you have to be safe. When I left, I remember my parents and my family, they were like, maybe half a year, maybe something like that, you're going to go back. I was like, no, I'm not going to get back because I kind of knew that this was going to be for a long time.
Ivan knew he had to get out, but where could he go? He spoke to a handful of journalist colleagues, considered his options, and eventually settled on Armenia, since lots of Russians were going there at the time, and it was easy to get to without a visa. But after spending a few weeks in the capital city of Yerevan, he realized that Armenia wasn't actually a safe country to be a Russian journalist. So then he moved to Tbilisi, Georgia, all the while working remotely around the clock to report on the latest news from the war back home.
It was the time when the first tanks and the first troops, Russian troops, invaded Ukraine, and it was really hard psychologically. But at the same time, when you're doing news, you can sort of immerse yourself into this. You're just doing your work. You're not thinking about what's going to happen to you, what's going to happen to your country or something.
Although Georgia was a step up from Armenia, it still didn't seem like an ideal solution. So after a few months, Ivan began searching around again to see what alternatives were out there.
I was in touch with a friend of mine, and I was like, okay, I need to leave Georgia and I need to go to some European country. And he was like, okay, maybe I can try to arrange you a visa or something like that.
So Ivan's friend connected him with a foundation that was assisting people in his situation.
They help journalists, they help refugees, Ukrainian refugees, human rights defenders, everything from legal help to get a SIM card or something. So basically everything.
They offered to help him relocate to the city of Riga in the Baltic country of Latvia, which had become a sort of hub for exiled Russian journalists, and things started to move really quickly.
I remember I was supposed to leave my apartment in Georgia on Friday, and then on Tuesday I got contacted by these people from Riga who were helping Russian journalists. It was right out of the blue, okay, yeah, if you want, yeah, you can go to Riga, we can arrange you a visa and all that. When your apartment lease is up, and I was on Friday, and I was oh yeah, so come on Friday. I remember I was telling my family, okay, so I guess I'm moving to Riga. I'd never been there before, but I'm okay, I googled Riga, and I was how does it look like? I mean, what's with Riga? And I was oh, okay, yeah, that looks nice. So it was really random.
Last February, I flew to Latvia and met up with Ivan to see how he's adapting to what, for the time being at least, has become his new home. So tell me about Latvia and Riga, the capital city where you now live. What is it like here?
Riga is great. I mean, if you're into big cities, you're probably not gonna like Riga, because I know a lot of my colleagues who used to live in Moscow before they moved here. They feel they live in a countryside or something. It's Riga is small, but at the same time, it's a good city for a comfortable living. And for example, you can go around without any car or without any public transportation or something. There's concerts, and there's a lot of shops and stores and artists and musicians from all over the world coming here. Actually, a lot of Russian exiled artists come here also. Because it's part of the European Union, you can easily travel to all sorts of different places. For example, if I want to go to Berlin, it's 2-hour flight. If I want to go to Copenhagen or Stockholm, it's 1:30 or something like that. For people with medium income, it's a really good place to live because it's not expensive. The rent is cheap. I mean, I'm far from home, if you know what I mean, but it's not a bad place to be, far from home. Home is better, of course, but it's not I'm torturing myself being here.
By the time I met up with him, he'd been living there for more than a year and a half, and his girlfriend had now joined him. They'd both settled into their new life and had adjusted well to the transition, helped along by the fact that Latvia has a large Russian-speaking population and didn't feel all that different from what they were used to. As we chatted, Ivan showed me around his newly adopted city.
We entered the Old Town, which is like the main tourist destination here in Riga. There are a lot of like Art Nouveau buildings.
Cobblestone streets, winding paths. That's a big historic church tower.
Yeah, it's St. Peter's Church. It's Lutheran. We can see it from my apartment. I love this place. I mean, it feels different, but it feels cool.
Does this feel like home to you at all?
I don't know. I mean, I think like the word home lost all meaning. But I do feel like when my partner came here, she sort of made it feel like home. So, yeah, it's gotten better since she moved here. But I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know what home is.
What is it like being so close to Russia? Like, you could get in a car and be at the Russian border, and I don't know, how long would it take you?
4 hours or something.
Oh, is it that far? Okay, but still not. I mean, and St. Petersburg isn't that far away.
Yeah.
Either. So you're so close, but also in some ways so far away.
Yeah.
Like, you can't cross the border.
Yeah. I mean, I prefer not to think about it, because when I do, it gets me really depressed, because like I choose not to like notice Russia on the world map, but it's so fucking hard because Russia is huge. So it's like it's
the hardest country not to notice. Geographically.
Yeah. When I like Google something and when I look on the map, you know, I only have this. I don't know how to explain it.
You're zoomed in on the map to
it's
try
just like,
to avoid Russia.
Yeah, I only like have this sort of, because I don't have Russia on my map, on my personal map, unfortunately. Sometimes when I feel like particularly sad, you know, when you're flying somewhere and there's this like screen on an airplane, and I can just zoom to my hometown just to look at this sort of
Google Street View or something.
Yeah, Google Street View, yeah.
When was the last time you were in Russia?
So I left in March 22, but I went back to Russia briefly for like, I don't know, maybe 5 days, maybe a week or so. I think it was like August or September 2022, and I don't remember much about it. To be honest, I didn't like it. My hometown, it was great, and to see my dearest and closest friends, it was great, but Moscow didn't change a bit, and I didn't like it because it all felt like really unnatural. Because how can your city not change when this happens?
Like people are living in a fantasy world, kind of?
Yes. I mean, I feel like these people, they're living their regular lives. They're not bad. It's totally fine. My feeling was that it doesn't feel right to me.
Do you miss Russia?
Yeah, I mean, I do, but I miss the image of Russia that I have in my head, the Russia before the war. Like, it's a very obvious question, you know, like, do you miss Russia when you're not able to go back? I don't have an answer, like, exact answer to that, because it's really hard. It's really hard to sort of know what you feel about your home country when you're in this position. When I talk with my friends, when I'm FaceTiming them, sometimes I just ask them, can you show me the view from your apartment? And they're like, are you kidding me? Of course, but it's not like, it looks like shit. But you ask, I'm like, well, yeah, but it's, you know, it's home. And now that you're asking me about that, I'm like, oh yeah, I do miss, you know, something hurts maybe a little.
You still keep in touch with a lot of friends and family back home?
Yeah, because like my real closest friends are still in Russia. I haven't seen some of them in a really long time, which is painful.
What is their situation living in Russia now?
I mean, it's hard, it's not safe and all that, but you cannot feel this danger all the time. So people just, you know, go on with their lives. They cannot be completely, like, unaware of what is happening, so they still keep an eye on the news and all that. And they all, like, anti-war and all that, but they just have to live. They just have to live somehow, you know? They just don't have the emotional and the physical and, like, psychological capacity to worry about themselves, about the country, about their parents all the time. They just don't have this ability.
Do you have friends who've been sent off to the war in Ukraine?
Friends, no, but I know a lot of people. I mean, I grew up in a small town, so we used to hang out with some of them or I just knew them, just maybe we were at the bar at some point or something. They were sent out to the war. Some of them voluntarily. I mean, I still feel sorry for them because they've been fooled by the government that someone, was attacking us or something. But I feel a lot more sorry about the people who were mobilized.
Against their will.
Yeah,
they didn't have a choice.
They didn't have any choice. I mean, I know that a lot of people from Europe or from the United States or from Ukraine for that matter, they can say that they did have a choice. They could have gone to, to the forest or something. But it's not a real option and it's not realistic. Or sometimes people say that, if you don't want to go to war, you can just cut your leg off or something. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's an easy thing.
It's not a real choice.
Yeah, and it's not a real choice and it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, come on.
Are there people who you no longer speak to for political reasons?
One of my closest friends, he's the supporter, he's pro-war. Still, I talk to him and we try to maintain our relationship. We try to remain friends, which is hard, but we're still trying to do that because when this all over, he's probably going to change his mind. Or maybe not, but it's still, sometimes we're fighting over the phone, basically. Sometimes we're just you're stupid, now you stupid. Sometimes we're just going to argue with each other pretty heavily. He knows my point. I know his point of view, and I know that he thinks that, but it's also not very personal. If he's pro-war, it doesn't mean he necessarily thinks that I'm a traitor or something, because he knows I'm a decent guy, and he's my childhood friend, so we've known each other for 20 years. He once told me that I love how you stand on your point and don't really care who's in front of you, and sometimes even when another bad thing happens, he surprises me in a good way because he also thinks the same that I do.
What is this river here?
It's the river Daugava. There's this ferry or something. You can go from here to Helsinki, Finland, and you can go to Stockholm.
Russia's not that far away. Do you feel safe as a Russian journalist working and living here?
It's a tricky question because yes, I do feel safe, and no, I do not feel safe. Because if you're a Russian journalist, you cannot be safe anywhere, basically. Because Russia is a big country, Russia has a lot of resources, and if you cross some sort of a line, no one knows what this line looks like and all that, but if you cross some sort of a line and your government of your country hates you, you're going to be living a pretty hard life. Because it's you need to choose the places that you can go to, you need to be very cautious in terms of traveling, in terms of finances, in terms of everything, basically. But at the same time, yes, I do feel safe because it's a safe country. There's no Russian tanks near the border, thankfully, and probably just yet. But still, you have to be careful. And this sort of feeling of you have some risks, this sort of becomes background noise for you because you cannot always worry about this stuff, but you can just be aware. Because we should double check it, and it's not an official number, but probably Latvia is the most filled with KGB agents country in Europe. One of the Latvian representatives in European Commission, just recently there was this investigation that concluded that she was a Russian agent, FSB agent or something. So there are a lot of people who have something to do with the Russian government.
There's something in the back of your mind where you always feel like you might be being watched.
Yeah, probably, because sometimes things happen and it only takes one precedent and then we're going to be scared as shit because I don't know, maybe some FSB agent or something going to harm a journalist or political activist or I don't know, maybe kill someone, and this is going to be a whole new life for us here. So this is the embassy, the Russian embassy. This is a pretty cool building.
It's an old mansion.
Yeah.
There's a Russian flag there.
Yeah. And there's, I think it's Ukrainian embassy next door, which is kind of it's not really appropriate now, but before that, Russia, Ukraine were always kind of together.
Across the street was a medical museum, and on its wall was a giant painting.
They put Putin's portrait And he's like half dead, half skeleton or something. So
It's like a portrait of Putin, but he has a skeleton face with
it's kind of creepy.
So it's right across the street facing the Russian embassy.
So it's supposed to be like a reminder or something, but maybe they just closed the drapes so they
don't have to look at it all day.
Yeah, because it's like
thumbing their nose at the Russian embassy.
Okay, so and then we're gonna cross the street to go to the other side.
So we're on the other side of the Russian embassy here, across this main street. And what is this set up here?
Okay, a lot of stuff, a lot of action happening here. So this is a coffin for Vladimir Putin. There's also Ukrainian flag. Oh God, there's also the portrait of Navalny. This is hard.
At the time of my visit, it had been just over a week since the death of Alexei Navalny in a Russian penal colony above the Arctic Circle. So mourners had left a huge pile of fresh flowers, along with dozens of candles.
My friends, they were telling me that there's this memorial for him, but I mean, I never saw it myself. So sad. Yeah, very sad. Oh, remember this? I was at this rally. I was reporting on this rally.
There's a picture of him from a rally. You were actually there?
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah. Before Navalny was killed, we Russians, we were pretty hopeful. And now we just don't have this hope. There's also... Jesus Christ. There's also like a... I think it's like for Putin,
It's a noose with the effigy of Putin hanging here.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there was also a sort of outdoor art installation.
Describe what we're looking at here.
Oh, Jesus, this is like the toughest installation here. So this is called Kidnapped by Russia. This is actually like a children's playground. And there's like a Bluetooth speaker and it plays children crying and sounds of swings squeaking.
There was metal fencing surrounding this play area that had a slide, a seesaw, and a swing. Everything was in blue and yellow, the colors of the Ukrainian flag, and there were also stuffed animals. It was all covered with police tape and barbed wire, and the swing was moving back and forth as if it was being operated by the ghost of an invisible child. A sign on the fence explained that since the start of the war, Russia had kidnapped nearly 20,000 Ukrainian children, doing everything it could to erase their Ukrainian heritage, childhood, and cultural identity. There was also a link to a website, which I've included in the show notes for this episode. It was definitely eerie. After spending several hours showing me around downtown Riga, Ivan brought me to the media hub that he's been working out of since arriving in Latvia.
This is a place where a lot of Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian journalists are based. This was established by this foundation that helps exiled journalists and political activists. So this is basically office space, but it's also a place for a community center. We have a lot of events here. We have a lot of people coming over. We have workshops, lectures, or something like that. We also have this studio here. Actually, we have two studios.
This is like a radio recording or podcast recording studio.
Yeah, and this is like pretty cool. As you can see, this
professional gear here.
Professional gear and all that. There's also a green screen to do videos and stuff. So this is one studio, and then we have another one here, a bit smaller. And they also have this big open space.
Like a co-working area.
Yeah.
So how long has this space been here?
It was established after the war started, but it's become really like big and all that after some Russian exiles came here.
In this digital age, Ivan told me it's easy to connect with other exiled journalists over the internet, but it means a lot to him to have this space where he could meet face to face with other people who are dealing with some of the same challenges as him. People like this colleague he ran into during our visit. Ivan broke away to chat with him for a bit, then returned a few minutes later and relayed the conversation he'd just had.
This guy that I was talking to, he's in this extremist and terrorist list. To the Russian government, he's a terrorist, but he's just a political activist. And he was telling me he needs to go back to another country to get another passport, like a travel document. This is the document that you get when you cannot
go to the Russian embassy, or you can end up like Jamal Khashoggi or something. Yeah, so this country gives you this document that you can use to travel. But yeah, he's one of us. He's one of the people who was from here. We're all in the same boat here. We all have the same problems and all that.
Is different than, back in the U.S. or somewhere else, like just typical office chat. Oh, how was your weekend? Did you watch the game? Here, it's like, I need to get my proper visa to stay in this country and go to this other embassy. And it's like very different conversations you have.
Yeah. Like this guy said, I cannot go to the Russian embassy because I'm a terrorist. So yeah, it's like the only way to sort of live your life is when you have like humor and you can joke about this stuff, because otherwise you would just die, because it's hard. It's hard.
You hear a lot of stories like that.
Yeah. There are a lot of people, like foreign agents in Russia, like...
That's what they're called.
Yeah. Foreign agents, like undesirable organization leaders, and like extremists, terrorists, all sorts of criminals, basically.
And what are their offenses that get them branded with these titles?
Like doing, investigative journalism, doing like political activism, something like that. Nothing really criminal. It's just like to the Russian state, it's a criminal offense.
To be more precise, Russian law states that organizations and media outlets that receive any sort of support from outside of Russia, including donations and advertising dollars, are now subject to being branded with this foreign agent label.
Are there like different levels of different status, like foreign agent and then like trader and other levels?
Yeah. So it's like you can be foreign agent and even like live in Russia, but every public message that you put out, you should put this product, this content was created and distributed by a person who is a foreign agent. Then you have to like say your name, your surname, your patronymic name and all that.
So if you're a journalist writing an article, you have to put that disclaimer at the bottom of the article that this was written by a foreign agent.
At the top, and you have to use caps lock to do this, because this disclaimer should be clearly visible for the people so that they know that you're a traitor and foreign agent. Yeah, and then like undesirable organization, it's more of a legal status. Like undesirable organization is tougher than foreign agent because, for example, if you give an interview to an undesirable organization, the Russian state says that it's cooperation with this undesirable organization and it's punishable by up to 4 years in prison.
From the journalist standpoint, that makes it hard to do your job because you can't interview anyone because everyone's going to be afraid to speak to you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is like, for example, for Meduza, which is like the biggest independent outlet. It's also designated as an undesirable organization, but it's online print media, so it's okay for them. When you write in the feature, you can just, like change the name or something. But like for TV Rain, which is a TV station, how do you interview people from Russia? You have no option. You cannot blur face, and you cannot like do this with the person on camera.
For every single story.
Yeah, for every single story. So it's hard for them. It's really hard for them. It's just ridiculous because it's like if you stop giving interviews, it means that you're sort of agreeing with the Russian state, and that's why I'm not stopping giving these interviews to undesirable organization if I'm asked to. I mean, I've given at least 6 probably or something like that. One interview is punishable by a relatively small fine, like $50 or $100 or something like that, and the next offense is repeated offense is up to 4 years in prison. If I end up convicted in absentia or something, then, okay, like, we'll figure something out from there. But I don't want to agree that I'm a foreign agent or I'm an undesirable organization cooperator or something.
So what does that mean? Like, if you were to return to Russia right now, what would that mean?
I don't have any, like, legal persecution open up against me as of now because they just haven't noticed that I've done these interviews. But if they will notice it, then they will have enough content to just convict me to some sort of cooperation with undesirable organization or something like that. That's the thing, like you can only find out by, going to Russia, and then you will find out during like the customs.
You won't get far past the border. You'll find out pretty soon right away.
Yeah.
If you're on some government list or something.
Yeah. I've done a couple of podcast episodes and I've put it out on Yandex Music, which is like Russian streaming service, and then Roskomnadzor, the censorship agency, they came to Yandex Music, and this is like kind of a big deal, and they ordered Yandex Music to delete this episode because it contains the discreditation of the Russian army.
That means that I question some actions of the Russian government, Russian troops, or I just use the word war. So yeah, maybe I'm in some sort of a list, but I don't know.
So tell me about the journalist work you've been doing since you arrived in Latvia.
We founded this outlet called Nova Vkladka, which can be translated as the new tab. The idea was to open the new tab and read an article. We cover how Russian regions are changing because of the war in Ukraine and what's the circumstances, what are the implications and all that. We have a lot of journalists on the ground in Russia. They work for us. They write for us anonymously. We do long-form pieces, like features. We aspire to be New Yorker or Netflix, but in text form. I'm a co-founder, and I also do a lot of fundraising, strategic partnerships and all that. We're now in the process of translating and adapting these pieces to English because this is really good long-form features with brilliant photography and brilliant writing. If you want, I can show you. This is a story about Olga from Lugansk region. She's living in the Moscow region with her son and her brother, who I think lost his leg on the war or something like that. So it's a story of a family, and they've been living in very poor and bad conditions. They basically thought that Russia's going to save them from the Nazis, and then it turned out completely different. So this is a big feature, 20 minutes read, photos, portraits, and all that.
You said you have this network of correspondents around Russia who are, I guess, doing this journalism undercover there and then feeding you stories to post on the website.
Yeah. Regularly, we have, I think it's about 15 journalists, but we also have a lot of contacts on the ground. So if you want to cover some story, in Altai region, for example, we don't have a local journalist, we can just send or find some journalists to cover the story for us.
What about the people who speak to them? They're also taking a risk, right?
Yeah, but luckily we're only blocked by the Roskomnadzor, the censorship agency in Russia. So you cannot access our website without VPN from Russia. But we're only blocked, which is in Russia nowadays, it's a relatively good thing. I mean, you're just blocked. It's not even a status or something. So we're not foreign agents. We're not undesirable organization, not anything like that. So it's safe for Russians to talk to us, relatively safe again, because it also matters what they're going to say to us.
I'm just trying to get a sense of what is it like living in Russia nowadays, and you get a call or someone knocks on your door, some journalist, and then do you have to go to some website and check, are they on this list? Am I allowed to speak to them?
Yeah, I think most of potential characters for the story, they ask, are you foreign agents? Are you undesirable? Are you pro-Russian? Are you ours? Or are you foreigners or something like that? Are you traitors sometimes? And the fact that we don't have any status, apart from being blocked, it helps a lot because we can say that, no, we're not foreign agents, we're not undesirable, we're just good people, we're just doing our jobs. But yeah, if a journalist approaches you, you have to check, you have to ask him or her whether they're safe to talk to or not.
It's kind of a catch-22, isn't it? I mean, the reason that you're not on any government list yet is because basically you're a startup. You're a small organization. Yeah. You're flying under the radar at this point. I mean, the goal with any startup is to grow. Yeah. But that's the danger, isn't it? Because the more you grow, the more attention you might attract.
Yeah, you want to grow, you want to do better journalism, but at the same time, you know that the better journalism you do, right, the more you can end up on some sort of a list. But we've been lucky so far because we didn't have any cases of persecution of our journalists because we're very cautious about their security. So we're trying to do everything to protect them. But we're probably going to end up on this list because we're going to cross some sort of a line. I don't know, maybe some FSB worker from Perm or Vladimir region. He's just going to be pissed with us and he just say, okay, we need to get this thing done and we will find ourselves on this foreign agent list. It's also updated every Friday. So it's kind of oh, it's Friday. Maybe I'm going to be a foreign agent this week. It's how we live right now.
What do you hear from your readers? It seems like if they keep coming back, they value this kind of journalism?
Yeah, they value and they're very thankful. And I remember when Navalny was killed, a lot of people send us messages thank you for being there for us. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for connecting us between each other. Thank you for being this light in this dark times. So yeah, they're very thankful. And I mean, honestly, when people write something to us, it's so hard emotionally
to comprehend the idea that these people are inside Russia and they value us, because sometimes it just feels like it's so unnecessary, because what are we doing even here? I mean, we're not gonna, topple the dictator. It's not gonna happen because of journalism. It's just like we do something and we hope that maybe this will change something, but probably not. But still, people are very thankful. It's just like crazy. It's crazy.
What keeps you going?
Oh, that's a hard question. This media outlet that I work for, our content is not like liberal or conservative. It's something in the middle. And I think for a lot of people that's important, even like for those who don't know what to believe. Sometimes they feel like maybe we connect them to some sort of a different source of information. We connect them to the reality of Russia and Russian regions. And I think that's important. I think maybe that makes some sort of a difference. For me personally, I remember this one quote by Sergei Dovlatov, the Russian writer, and he lived in New York after he left the Soviet Union. When he was asked why did he leave the Soviet Union, he said, "I left to become a writer." And in some ways, I think I left to become a journalist. It's all selfish, right? It's all like, you just want to do this. I feel like I just do this thing because there's no way for me not to do it. So it's that simple. It's just my way of communicating with the world.
Ivan told me he doesn't plan on staying in Latvia forever. He wants to find somewhere else that feels more stable and secure for the long term. He hopes that one day he could move to the United States, because he says that for all of the US's problems, it actually feels really similar to Russia, with its strong undercurrents of both patriotism and political polarization. Ivan doesn't expect that he'll be able to return to Russia for many years, until both Putin and Putinism are no longer a reality. And by that point, he imagines he will have started a family in a new country somewhere else in the world. So while he definitely wants his future kids to speak fluent Russian, he says it's unlikely that they'll ever think of Russia as their home. Visit my website at farfromhomepodcast.org to see photos from my trip to Latvia. And if you're new to the program, check out my archives with other stories from the past 3 seasons of this show. As always, you could drop me a line with your thoughts, feedback, or questions at info@farfromhomepodcast.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell a friend about it, because word of mouth is really the best way to help this program grow. And I also encourage you to leave me a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use. Until next time, I'm Scott Gurian. Thanks so much for listening.